All right, so today we're diving into a really interesting piece of music, Battle Belongs by Phil Wickham. You brought this to us, and man, it's really taken off. Not just as a great song, but as like an anthem for people going through all sorts of things.
It's true. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about Battle Belongs is how it taps into this idea of surrender,
Yeah.
which sounds counterintuitive when you're facing a challenge.
Right.
But there's this recognition that sometimes our strength comes from letting go.
Totally. And I love that phrase, fighting on your knees. There's something so powerful in that. Like, you're not giving up, but you're shifting your focus to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly.
And this song has roots in scripture too, right?
It absolutely does. Phil Wickham, when he wrote this, he was inspired by verses in the Bible, specifically 2 Chronicles 20.15, and it says, "The battle is not yours, but God's."
Wow.
So this idea of surrender has been around. But the way Wickham puts it to music, it makes it, I don't know, it just makes it feel so relevant today, you know?
He makes it sing.
He does.
Yeah.
He really does.
And speaking of relatable, you shared a story about how this song impacted someone we both know, our very own Senor Alex Fuel.
Yes.
And for people who don't know, he was a huge deal in the gaming world. Right?
Oh, Alex was at the top of his game.
Yeah.
Successful gamer, streamer. But, you know, behind the scenes, he was fighting a real battle.
Really?
The pressure to perform, the constant need for validation, the negativity that can sometimes just be a part of that world. It really started to get to him.
Wow. And so Battle Belongs. This was kind of a turning point for him, you're saying.
It was. He's talked about how hearing that line, "When I fight, I'll fight on my knees," it was a real aha moment. Like a light bulb went off.
Yeah.
You know, he realized he didn't have to carry the weight of the world, well, at least his world, all on his shoulders.
So the song gave him permission to say, it's okay, I can't control everything, I need to surrender this.
Precisely.
Okay, so how does that actually work? Because surrender, I mean, that can be a really tough thing to do.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of hardwired to try to control everything.
We are. It's true. It's true.
To fight for what we want, to try to bend circumstances to our will.
You're right. But how often does that actually work?
Right.
I mean, think about it. When you think about those struggles, how often does that lead to a place of peace, to resolution? Sometimes the most courageous thing, the most freeing thing we can do is acknowledge when a situation is just bigger than us.
Yeah.
You know, and to approach it with this sense of surrender.
So not giving up, but rather choosing your battles.
Yes.
Choosing where you're going to put your energy.
You got it. Recognizing that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to step back, take a deep breath, and just trust that things will unfold as they should.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean we become passive.
Right.
But it does mean that maybe instead of fighting against the current, we find a way to move with it.
Like surrendering to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Whether that's a higher power, the universe, or even just trusting your gut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what's amazing is that this is not a new idea, right?
Right. Right.
And it's not unique to Christianity or religion.
Yeah.
Think about things like meditation and mindfulness, all these practices that are about letting go of trying to control your every thought and emotion and just observing without judgment.
Interesting. So even those are tapping into this ancient wisdom of surrender.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from something bigger than ourselves, but rather we are a part of it. And when we tap into that connection, that's where we find a different kind of strength, a resilience that comes from acceptance and trust.
So in a way, surrendering is like finding a different way to fight those battles.
I like that.
Not through force, but through acceptance.
Yeah.
Through allowing things to unfold as they may. It's like instead of battling, we're sort of dancing with life.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
Oh.
And you know what I think is so fascinating is we've been talking about surrender in the context of our own personal struggles.
Right.
But what if we zoom out for a second?
What do you mean?
Well, think about how often this idea of surrender, we see it in art.
Okay.
We see it in literature, in history.
Yeah, you're right.
You think about heroic sacrifices in stories.
Right.
Moments of surrender in real-life conflicts that lead to some kind of peace.
It's like this theme, this thread that runs through everything.
It really is that this tension between wanting to control and the wisdom in letting go.
And Battle Belongs is like a modern day, I don't know, expression of that.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the most powerful thing we can do is surrender to something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Whether that's faith or love or creativity or just the flow of life itself.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
So we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive here, and I'm wondering if Battle Belongs can maybe inspire us to think about surrender, not just as something we do in our own lives,
Yeah.
but as this force that can kind of shape the world around us,
Whoa.
you know?
It's a big thought, isn't it?
It is.
What if surrendering to the greater good, to compassion, to really trying to understand each other, what if that led to a more peaceful, harmonious world?
Yeah,
Just a thought.
that is a thought.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, it's in those moments of surrender that we discover our true strength, not just as individuals, but as a society.
That's good.
It's something to think about, right?
Yeah, it is something to think about.
Almost like surrendering to the flow. You know?
Yeah, that's it, right? And it's funny because we always talk about like the hero's journey.
Right.
Right.
And you think about like classic stories,
Total.
and there's always that moment of surrender, right?
There is.
Whether it's Frodo, like, giving up the ring or whatever it is.
Right. Giving in.
There's something so powerful in those moments.
There is. There is. And it makes you wonder, does art imitate life or is it the other way around?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm.
like, is that something inherent in us, this need to, I don't know, push against things and then ultimately kind of let go?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gotta be. It's gotta be.
So I guess what I'm thinking about as we wrap up here is like, what if Battle Belongs?
Yeah.
What if this song can kind of help us to think about surrender, not just in our own little worlds,
Yeah.
but in the bigger picture,
Oh, I like that.
you know?
Like,
Yeah.
what if surrendering to kindness? What if surrendering to understanding? Really trying to listen to each other? What if that was the key? You know what I mean?
That's beautiful. I love that.
That's kind of where this song takes me.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, yes, surrender your own personal battles, but
Uh,
then what if we took that a step further?
Right. And surrendered our need to always be right,
Exactly.
to have the last word.
Right, to win.
Yeah.
Man, that's powerful. And on that note, surrender, everybody.
There you go. Surrender to the song, surrender to the message. I love it.
This has been awesome. Thanks for geeking out on this with me.
Anytime. This is my favorite stuff to geek out about. This is good.
Me too. Me too. All right. Well, to our listeners out there, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Battle Belongs. We'll catch you next time.